Alrighty, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Bullpen Blues. As always, I'm your co-host Kevin Dixon, joined by our good buddy David Esser. David, the lockout is over.
Kevin, it was a long few months, but baseball's officially back. I'm genuinely excited. I'm very, very grateful we're getting a full 162 games. Spring training right around the corner, dude.
Yeah, I don't want to, toot our own horns, but we did say we weren't concerned about losing any games way back when. Did it get dicey? Of course it got dicey, because why wouldn't it? But Bullpen Blues strike again.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I lost faith there at the end. I remember I was texting Kevin the morning when the lockout ended, and I was like, "There's no way. There's no way they're getting this done. Negotiations are gonna fall through. They're gonna not meet for another week." Like I was very out on the idea of them figuring things out, before their artificial deadlines. But they did it. They they wrapped it up, and we're getting a full season.
I think that's a good place to start, David. And just mentioning how you didn't think a deal was going to get done. It appeared the MLBPA was going to do everything they could to ensure that a deal didn't get done. And we don't mean the players. We're not talking the players, because the players ended up stepping up and coming together and kind of being like, look, we need to make this deal. But the union board voted 8-0 in favor of declining the most recent CBA, which ended up getting approved, only to be overruled 26-4 by the players' reps. What is your interpretation of that, David?
Kevin, can I go on a rant real quick? Is that
Yeah, the floor is yours, man.
Me and Kevin, we were on week and a half ago, week ago, and we've been kind of tiptoeing around this issue. We didn't want to offend some people. You get on Twitter, you get on Facebook. A lot of people have felt very strongly that the owners are to blame. Kevin, excuse my language, that was always bullshit. It just was. It's ridiculous. And in hindsight, you look at how the vote ended. It was very clear. It was not owners versus players. It was owners, players, and the union. And I think it's very important to distinguish the difference between the players' reps, who voted overwhelmingly in favor of this season starting, and the union, who voted 100% against the season starting. 8-0, as Kevin has up on the screen if you're watching with us on YouTube right now, that the union voted 8-0 in favor of declining the latest negotiation, whereas every single owner and 26 of the 30 teams voted yes. As negotiation leaks continue to trickle out over the last couple of days, over the last couple of weeks, Kevin, the owners were making good offers. And the offers weren't perfect. They never are. That's how these things go. You got to give a little bit, you take a little bit. That's how it works. But we were getting to the final couple days where it just seemed like no matter what the owners offered, the union was going to find a way to label it as disgusting, disrespectful, ridiculous. How could we ever accept this offer? I mean, Kevin, it was hinging on the international draft. Granted, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know a lot about how the international process works, but I know the current process is extremely flawed, where a lot of young South American, Latin American players are getting taken advantage of in the system. So I have no idea why the union, of all people, was declining an opportunity to amend that. That's Kevin? That's their job. So to me, on the outside looking in, I feel like on the inside looking in, I think as you see on how the vote ended, a lot of people were frustrated with the union just not even negotiating at all. They weren't trying to get a deal done. They were just trying to win. They were trying to use their social media support. They wanted to take a stand against the owners, and it was ridiculous. At the end of the day, I understand some of these issues are important, but getting baseball started is the most important issue. And I think the owners wanted to start baseball, the players' reps wanted to start baseball, and the union were doing their own thing, trying to delay this process as long as possible, trying to leak stuff to the media, trying to make sure that this season did not start on time so that everyone would get mad at the owners, everyone would get mad at Rob Manfred, when in reality, the union, they were the ones holding this thing up from day one.
Yeah, and it really became apparent in the last week and a half or so as the offers from the owners did start to concede, and they started to give a lot more to what the players were wanting to do. Granted, they weren't meeting exactly where the players wanted them to get to, and the players or the union was, like you said, labeling it as disrespectful or disgusting. And I understand the union stance of you start high in negotiations. You start really high, and then you try to work your way. You try to get them to come up, and you come down a little bit. and you meet somewhere where realistically you think you're going to get to. The union wouldn't budge, David. And it got to the point in the last week and a half or so on social media where the tide had turned. People were turning on the players' union. And it got to the point where it wasn't so much they were praising the owners because, look, I understand where people's disdain for the owners come from. I get it. They're the elite 1%. They're not looked at favorably in society. Like I understand, but I also understand it's a business. So like we can sit here, David, and say like they're billionaires. It's still a business. At the end of the day, it's still there to make money. They wouldn't be here if they weren't trying to make money. But the players basically wouldn't come down. And as the owners are conceding more and more, the tides are turning. People are turning on the players' union. And that's kind of where it got to the point where I think the players' reps were like, look, we got a pretty damn good offer here. Let's just get back to baseball. And 26-4 to me is really telling. I believe the teams were, David, correct me if I'm wrong. I know it was the Yankees, the Mets, the Cardinals. Who was the fourth team?
Houston Astros.
Houston Astros are the four teams to decline. I don't have the player reps in front of me for each team, but I'm almost positive it was Max Scherzer for the Mets, who was very vocal in the whole ordeal, which, like, you're 38 years old, brother. Like I understand, like, you're fighting for the future kids, but, like, you're also impacting the guys who are currently playing the game. And it's clear 26-4 was the vote. It's clear that there was an absolute disconnect between the union and what the players wanted to do. And Tony Clark kind of deflected that yesterday. I don't know if you saw, he was interviewed about it, and he said it wasn't more of a disconnect. It was more of a conversation between the union and the players. But 26-4, David, that's significant. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Tony Clark is full of it. I don't think it was a conversation. It was not, because if it was, I think, Kevin, we would have had baseball 2 weeks ago. We would have had it, 3 weeks ago. Like, I think the union was so, like, their goals did not align with the average player, if that makes sense. Someone like Max Scherzer, Francisco Lindor, these extremely wealthy players who really it doesn't matter to them. They're going to get their money no matter what. They got crazy brand deals. They've all made generational wealth. Like, for them to miss a couple games, for them to miss a couple weeks of baseball, who cares, right? Like, genuinely, who cares? They'd much rather go in there and lay it hard on the owners and win the big fight and go down in history as the union who broke the owners and all this crap that nobody really cares about. But to the average players, to the Bryson Stotts of the world, to the Alec Bohms of the world, to the guys who barely have a year of service time, if any service time at all, like, they don't care about some of these issues. They don't care about the arbitration pool. They don't care. They care about the minimum salary, but to an extent, 700,000 versus 710,000, it's not that big of a deal to them.
Yeah.
They're going to lose more money missing games than they are with that extra 10,000 being included. They don't care about the international draft. They don't care about qualifying offers. Some of these issues that the union that they were getting so hell bent over that they just don't matter. And you saw it in that final vote, like you said, 26 teams. And I implore the players to start exploring change and who runs their union leadership, because clearly they're not on the same wavelength, and we don't want to see this pop up in the next CBA where the players want one thing, the owners want one thing, and then the union, they want something completely out in left field, completely different, something nobody cares about, stuff that's going to kill this sport and make us lose more games in the future.
Yeah, and isn't it funny? Like, you look at it now, all the drama that just took place, David, in the last 99 days was the lockout. So much drama, so much turmoil. We're stressing out, going back and forth. Like, I know I can attest to it because I know me and you both were, and a lot of people were, like, literally was stressed. I was actually stressed out about it, like, actually stressed, and that's how much we're invested in it. I was legitimately stressed out. I was disappointed, getting excited when, I got work in the morning and it's 1:30 a.m. and they're like, oh, talks are still going. We might have a deal tonight. I'm trying to stay up. Like, it takes a toll on everybody, man. Like, I was actually really stressed out about it. And after all that, all that happened was the regular season got pushed back a week. Like, that's, if you look at it, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, everything that went on, didn't lose any games. Season got pushed back a week, and in my opinion, we got some improvements to the game. That's probably a controversial take to some. I know not everyone's going to agree that that that's the case, but I do want to say to the naysayers, and I respect your opinion. And, if you truly disagree, then okay, that's your opinion. But change isn't always a bad thing. Change does not mean it's bad. I think some of the changes that were made are going to be beneficial to not only now but down the road as well. Like they mentioned the 2023 schedule, and this is something that's getting wiped under the rug a little bit, David. They're going to balance it out. You're going to play every single team. I like that. That's good for the sport of baseball. Do I need to see the Phillies play the Marlins 19 times a year? I don't think so. I would not mind to see the Minnesota Twins, the Royals. It gives you more exposure to different players that are around the country, because baseball has become such a regional sport that you're kind of locked into your team unless you're a big time fan of the game like we are. You're a fan of the Phillies, and you might not be exposed to teams out west or out in the central divisions. I think it's good for the sport. It'll be good for everyone to be able to see different players. So that's one thing that isn't really getting a lot of run. Nobody's really talking about it, but I think that's one of the better things that they're doing. Like, we're going to get to see Luis Robert, Tim Anderson with the White Sox. You go to the Royals, we get to see Whit Merrifield. There's guys all over in the American League, especially, that we're going to get exposure to. Matt Chapman, unless he's a Philly, unless they end up trading for him, we'll get to see Trout, Ohtani. You can go on and on.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's one I didn't even particularly think of in terms of improving the game. I think the two big ones, I think the two biggest issues, the three biggest issues that I felt got dealt with at the CBA that actually improved the game are, of course, the universal DH, which I love, Kevin. I think you love as well, and I get it. There's some baseball purists who don't like it, but it is good for the game. They're going to ban the shift starting in 2023, which I love.
Love that. I'm all in on that.
And the one that I particularly probably like the most is the expanded postseason format. The owners wanted to go up to 14 teams. They compromised to 12 teams. That's how negotiations work.
I think 12 is perfect, David. 12 is the number, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think what 12 teams does, because, and this confused me. Okay, this take confused me. A lot of people were upset at the expanded postseason format because they felt it was going to make it too easy. And that, all these terrible teams, teams at 82, 83 wins are going to be making the playoffs. Kevin, I think it's going to do the opposite. I think teams are going to be sitting at the deadline, hovering around 500, maybe a couple games below, and they're going to say, damn, like we can sneak into that sixth wild card spot. We can sneak our way in there. So let's go buy at the deadline. Let's go pick up a piece. Let's bring in a free agent off the street that we think can help. Let's be more active on the waiver wires. Let's call up some of our young guys who might help. I think it's going to encourage teams to spend. I mean, you saw it in 2020 when they did the shortened COVID year. A team like the Marlins, they were aggressive. They were trying to make the playoffs. And did they deserve to be there? No, probably not. But they were aggressive. They were trotting Sixto out there every fifth day, trying to win baseball games.
Did they win a series? I think they beat the Cubs.
They did. They won a series.
So they deserve to be there.
I just mean they fell off pretty hard the following year.
But it shows, though. It shows your point of, like, you just have to get in, man. Punch your ticket to the dance, anything can happen.
And I think this is going to encourage more teams to have that mentality of let's get it and see what happens. Where I think in the past you really had, you had your Dodgers, your Yankees, your Astros, your big spenders, the Mets. And then you had a couple, well-run teams, the A's, the Rays, some of these teams, the Cubs that try to sneak their way in there every year, but they're not really going all the way forward. And, maybe they win a series, maybe they don't. When in reality, I think this is going to force teams to not just continuously spend off season after or sell deadline after deadline, off season after off season. You look at a team like the Rangers this year, they've spent a lot of money. Like, they might be in mix for that sixth wild card spot. If they're sitting at the deadline and they're 5 or 6 games back, like, they're going to be spending, they're going to be aggressive, which in my opinion is great for the sport.
I also want to say it's only 12. What is it? It's like 34% of the league or something. Like, it's not a drastic number. So, like, the people that are saying that, they play 162 for a reason. Like, if it was 14 teams, I would agree. I would agree that's too much. There's just too many teams getting in. But 12, I think 12 is the perfect number because it's still only a good percentage of the league. And it's not going to – like, the Phillies wouldn't have got in last year, David. with the format the way it is now. And
And
I also want to go ahead.
well, I say this still being critical of the Phillies, but like Kevin, I think the Phillies could have made some noise in the playoffs last year. I mean, they
Well,
had a Cy Young candidate, they had the MVP of the league. Like, those are the teams that I want making the playoffs. And like, I get it, biased, I'm a Phillies fan, but I think that kind of proves the point that the Phillies last year still weren't going to make it. But if that's where the Phillies are next year, a couple wins better, that they creep up to the 85, 86 wins, like they should be in the playoffs. You want your
yeah,
MVPs in the
and
playoffs.
and it's kind of like it's funny you say that because that's exactly where I was going, David. Is 83 wins. Those teams don't stink at 83 wins. Are they great teams? No. But there's a lot worse teams out there than guys who go 82, 83 wins. Like those teams are competitive. They're in a lot of the games that they play. They might have something go wrong along the year, like the Phillies had blown saves like crazy. Because in reality, David, that's kind of where like they collapsed in September, but the stretch they had in May and June where they were blowing save after save after save, that kind of is what cost them. That's at the end of the day, that's what kept them out. So one, that's the beauty of the 162 is right there. But those teams don't stink. And I agree. That's why, it helps them have the opportunity to get in because they can make some noise if they do get to that point. But 83 and 79, if four different games go your way, you're at 87 wins. And then then people go, well, that could be a playoff team right there. It's four game difference. It's really like nothing crazy. Like those teams aren't bad. 75 win teams, okay. They're not very good. You know what I mean? But like it's a fine line. And I'm glad that you said what you said because it shows that we agree. Those teams don't stink, the 83 win teams. They could make some noise. I mean, the Braves won 88 and just won the World Series, dude. You know what I mean? And they were battling with the Phillies all throughout August and September.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hard on the Phillies, but Kevin, winning 83 games, that's tough. That's hard. That's hard to do. That's Kevin, that's a lot of baseball games to win. I mean,
For
you
sure. You need
to
a
win
lot to go your
83
way.
games, like you have to have 4 to 5 dudes in the rotation. You have to have a lineup that's running 6, 7 deep. Like that's not easy to do in this sport. There's a lot of teams who try very hard and they can't win 83 games. They'll spend a lot of money and they can't get there.
Took the
They'll have
Phillies
all
10 years, bro.
yeah. I mean, like I said, they had to have the MVP of the league and the second best pitcher in the National League to get there. Like it's challenging to do. So I agree. I think rewarding teams who finish over 500, who try to finish over 500, more importantly, who are out there spending in the off seasons, who are adding at the trade deadline, who are calling up their prospects. I think that's only going to do good things for the sport.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, it'll be good for the players too, David, because like you said, teams are going to be more willing to spend some money to try to improve their roster. Because I do understand the one stance that the union had, especially with the qualifying offers as well, of with how analytically driven the game is now, like teams were being really stingy in free agency, which, hey man, that's their right to do. But like as a player, you get there, you're 30 years old, and like you're playing your whole career to get that first big contract, and then you get one or two offers. It's kind of like, well, that sucks. So like I do understand the player's point in that sense, and adding teams to the postseason will improve that.
Yeah, like I said, I don't agree with the mindset that it'll hurt it. And a lot of fans, at least on Twitter, we're viewing it from the point that because it's easier now, fewer teams are going to spend. And I think the opposite. I think because it's a little more open, there's a quicker avenue to success. I think it's going to encourage teams to hand out the big contracts, go after that star talent, go after pitching in particular, and flesh out the roster a little bit because now you don't have to go from 70 wins to 90 wins to make the playoffs. You can go from
So
70
you
to
don't need to win
82.
90 games now.
Exactly. Because, I mean, you look at a team like Texas, I think it's a good example because they're being aggressive. They spend a lot of money. Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, and it looks like they're going to add more. Like they have a ways to go. And for them to get to 90 wins, it would take them a couple seasons. But for them to get to 80, 82 if they're lucky, sneak their way in, and bring in some help at the trade deadline, like Kevin, that could happen this year. So I think the difference between 82 wins and 92 wins is huge. So I think shortening that gap a little bit, bringing in more teams in the conversation, make it more competitive, not only in September when the race is getting tight, but make it more competitive in May, in April, when when typically these teams aren't that worried about wins, but now it's a little more important because you're only searching for 83, 84 wins. So I think just in general, DH, banning the shift, expanded postseason, opening up the schedule so teams can play other teams more consistently. It's all good stuff for the sport.
Yeah, David, and no more runner on second and extras, which I'm on board with. I would have liked to see a change to it, maybe implemented in the 13th inning, the 14th inning. But I don't really have any full gripes with them removing it because I hate it in MLB The Show. So I can only imagine when the players do it. It sucks. I hate when that happens in MLB The Show. But I understand the idea of it. You know, like, so if they wanted to implement it later in extra innings because, you know, it's July 11th and it's the 19th inning and you're playing the Pirates and the game's meaningless, like, I understand it from that point. And they also, which I love, David, and I hope we get more of them, which we will this year, but moving forward, we probably won't. 9-inning doubleheaders, man. They're back. No more of that 7-inning nonsense. Thank God, man. It'd be the 5th inning, David, and then 7-inning doubleheaders, and you're down 2-1, and you're sweating. It's like, it shouldn't be this way. It's the 5th inning.
Yeah, no, there's something beautiful about 18 innings of baseball in one day.
Yeah.
So I'm very much with you.
Yeah, so, you know, they did look to improve the game a bit. But at the end of the day, and me and you shared this sentiment, and I tweeted it, I feel, multiple times. I think you did as well. When people are heels dug in, agreeing with the union, no matter what was going on, they were against the owners. And in reality, David, I could not care less what their CBT is, what the minimum salary is. I personally don't really care. I just want them to play. At the end of the day, man, what impact does that have on me? You know, and like the CBT, the players are shooting for the stars. It did not matter what number they got, David. There's going to be 4 or 5 teams maybe that sniff that number. It's not going to force the Pirates or the Rays, the Twins. None of those teams are going to go out and just exceed now just because it's higher. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And this is kind of the last point I want to make before we switch to some actual Phillies talk, because we got some rumors to touch on. But yeah, I think overall, and this is true about every sport negotiation. This is true about every negotiation in life. Like, it's never as simple as one side is right and one side is wrong. And I think that's kind of the main takeaway a lot of people should walk away with this from. You know, the owners were not the good guys and the players were not the good guys. These were two sides trying to do the best for their brand, for their people, for their company, for their individuals. And it took them a while to meet in the middle, but that was always the goal. The numbers, they don't matter to us. They don't matter to the fans. You know, there's plenty of people on Twitter who were obsessed with the players getting their money. Like, look, it's great, but like, it doesn't actually matter to the average.
Who really cares? Fan. Exactly.
Who really cares about the qualifying offer and the draft picks and all this stuff? Like,
not me.
Don't lie to yourself and say that it's going to impact you on a day-to-day basis. So I think, you know, you look at how the vote ended up. I think it's great that the players and the owners kind of came together. Screw the union, replace them all. They suck. I think everyone should be able to agree that their goals were not to bring baseball back as soon as possible. But I think, you know, whenever the next CBA happens, I think that should be the important takeaway, that it's never as simple as one side is right and one side is wrong. It's negotiation. Both sides had flawed practices. You know, I think locking the players out from the start was a mistake by the owners. I think the players not negotiating in good faith was a mistake by the players. But at the end of the day, none of this stuff really matters. Baseball's back. That's the important part. Let's move forward and talk about baseball, you know.
I do want to pose a good question to you. Who won? Because, yeah, the players got some stuff that they wanted, but the owners kind of put a chink in the armor of the union and the players. I mean, there's some, like we said, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah,
who
it's a
do you
good
think
question.
won the negotiation?
I think the players won pretty sizably. I think you look at where the numbers started and the owners came up the most. They didn't really meet in the middle. It kind of met at like 75%.
No.
But I love the point you made there, where I think that the kind of the PR battle, I think the owners won, and I don't think they did it like it wasn't mischievous. They weren't trying to like trick people. They were just letting the process play out, and the union they did the most damage to themselves. There was a point where I feel like 99% of baseball fans were like, yeah, like go players, empowerment to the players, the union rocks. And by the end of the process, everyone was like, yo, like what's going on?
Yeah.
So yeah, like I don't think it was the owners like leaking false information or trying to trick fans or lie to fans. I really just think it was the union kind of hurt themselves in the process while simultaneously winning the money debate. So yeah, I think it's a good point that you're right. There was a little bit of crack in the armor there, a little bit of chink in the armor, where there's appears to be a not an alignment of interest between the union and the players that they're supposed to represent.
Yeah, it'll hey man, it'll be interesting how it plays out, but luckily we don't have to deal with that bullshit for at least a few years. I don't know how long the CBA currently runs. I didn't read into that too much, but as you mentioned, let's pivot to some Phillies talk because we're back to baseball, David. We are less than 1 month away from opening day, April 8th in Philadelphia against the Oakland A's, which I love. I think that's an interesting one to open with. You get the City Series is back. With that said, David, we were promised this free agency frenzy. Really not much has happened. We have a couple signings, and Andrelton Simmons, I think, was the biggest one that I saw. Clayton Kershaw signed back with the Dodgers. But I want to pose this to you, David. Who could the Phillies look to sign, and who do you think they're going to sign?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, like I'm so tired of these reporters carrying water for agents. Like I'm exhausted with the nonsense. Like, oh, it's going to be the craziest 24 hours in baseball history. Yeah. It wasn't. Okay, it wasn't. It sucked. But yeah, like Carlos Rodon signed with the Giants. Like sick. I don't really care. Okay, like oh Kershaw back to the Dodgers. Like nobody cares.
I was surprised by Kershaw. I was.
Good question.
I thought he was gone.
Yeah, I thought for sure he was going to Texas. I thought for sure, which would have been cool because I would have gone and made the drive over and watched him pitch, but I guess not. Yeah, good question. I think right off the bat, it's kind of the same names we've been talking about: your Chris Bryant, your Kyle Schwarbers, your Nick Castellanos. My guess is they're going to land one of them. Past that, knowing Dombrowski, I think you'll probably start dipping back into the pitching market. Some visa issues with Ranger Suarez, and they're already down Zach Eflin at the start of the year. So it looks like they're going to need to at least add somebody in that rotation just to give them some starts at the beginning of the year. The bullpen still needs help. So, whenever they tie up that big bat, the sooner the better. I think we've said it before. Yeah, like hopefully today, Kevin. Hopefully today. Let's sign somebody.
I was hoping to wake up to it.
Likewise, and knowing how our podcast is going to go, I'm going to be editing the damn thing, and I'm going to get a notification.
What is it? It's 10:23 a.m. Eastern. By the time this is posted in an hour or so, something will have already happened.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, probably one of the three: Bryant, Schwarber, Castellanos. I mean, if they don't get one of those three, it's been a disaster. We've royally messed up. But past that, probably just looking back into the pitching market.
All right. Well, what if they miss on those three, but they sign Carlos Correa?
I'm so glad you brought that up because I do think that's like the ultimate wild card. Because Kevin, I don't know if you saw, I think it was during the lockout or right before the lockout began, Carlos Correa switched agents.
Saw that. Yep.
He's a Scott Boras guy now, and Mr. John Middleton and the Philadelphia Phillies have a very good relationship with Scott Boras. It's one of the few things Middleton has done that's been smart since he's taken over the Phillies. So I think that's the ultimate wild card. Where do they forget about Chris Bryant, they forget about Kyle Schwarber, and they go for the ultimate blue chip, one of the best shortstops in baseball, one of the best players in baseball, and you pair Carlos Correa with Bryce Harper? That'd be absolutely nuts. So I do think that's like a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised personally, but I mean, I'm not going to be upset if they sign Carlos Correa. I still believe that the most likely signing will be Kyle Schwarber. However, don't be surprised if they're probably going to add multiple bats, would be my opinion, unless they bring back a Brad Miller, which they might. But they have a couple holes in the offense that they need to fill, which was so apparent in September. I think it was after a specific date in August. I don't have it now. We've definitely talked about it before, but I think the rest of the lineup outside of Bryce Harper had an OPS below 700. So it's kind of like it was Bryce Harper and a bunch of dudes. We said that multiple times last year. So they need a couple bats, David. I agree. I'd be astonished if they don't sign at least one of those guys. But I'm also not ruling out the idea of them signing two of those guys. And when I say two of those guys, I think it would be more likely they would sign one of those guys and then sign like a Conforto, who we were just talking about before we got on the air. But I also don't think it's impossible, David, that they could land Schwarber and Chris Bryant because they have room for both of them. I posed the idea to you the other day of, if you sign Chris Bryant, you stick him in left. You sign Kyle Schwarber, you can platoon him with Rhys Hoskins at first base and DH. You can get them both the same amount of time off their feet. They can both play that spot. I think a thing that gets overlooked about Schwarber, and it's something that I certainly overlooked. I was absolutely guilty of it. And the more you read about it, the more, you start to be like, okay, I can see that. And especially from playing sports, being in those kind of environments, he's like a glue guy, Kyle Schwarber. Baseball rat, everything baseball. He could help change the culture for the Phillies. And I think that's something that gets overlooked. It's not all about on the field. Obviously, what you do between the lines is huge, David, but the impact that you can bring off the field for an organization that's been lost. We have Bryce Harper, and that's about it, man. Everyone loves Rhys Hoskins because they say he's such a great clubhouse guy. They can get another guy in here that can help change the culture for the Phillies. And I think Kyle Schwarber is that guy. But then, in the same breath, you have Bryce Harper, who John Heyman described as stumping for the Phillies to sign Chris Bryant. I don't know what they're going to do. I honestly, genuinely don't know. For the longest time, I've been saying it's going to be Schwarber, and I still think it's going to be. But I really don't know.
Yeah, I love the point you made about Schwarber, and it's something we've talked about before. Guy knows how to win. Everywhere he goes, they get better.
He's just a baseball player, man. He's just like a true to the bone baseball player.
He can play several positions. He can hit at several positions in the lineup. World champion. Huge part to Boston's playoff run this past season. And similar things can be said about Chris Bryant. Can play multiple positions. World champion, MVP.
They could sign them both, reunite them like they were in Chicago. It's possible, David. They could.
Well, and I think the point that, and this is more a hope and less of a hunch. Dave's got to have a trick up his sleeve, doesn't he? It can't be as simple as sign Kyle Schwarber and I'm done, right? It can't just be sign Kyle Schwarber, trade for a half decent center fielder and some bullpen help. That's not going to be good enough. I think you add Kyle Schwarber, I do think they can make the wild card, but you're not going to go win a World Series. And I think the hope was always you're bringing in Dave Dombrowski for 3 years. Okay, we're on year 2. It's go time. Let's spend some money. Let's show me the ways of mighty Dave Dombrowski and build a championship caliber baseball team. So whether it's signing both, swinging some sort of franchise-altering trade, or signing a Carlos, there's got to be a trick that we're not expecting with Dombrowski, because if there's not, Kevin, I could run the Phillies and I could sign Kyle Schwarber. That's not hard to do. I know he's good. Everybody knows he's good. How much money you want, Kyle? Here it is. We're done. So my hope is that Dombrowski, and he's had a lot of time to think about it, 99 extra days to be exact. The hope is that there's some sort of master plan that we're not seeing that's been working behind the shadows for the last couple of months.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Kyle Schwarber played his cards right, David, because now with the universal DH being implemented, it greatly enhances his market. So he played it wise not to sign before the CBA was agreed upon. So, kudos to him. Good move on his part. But yeah, man, he's a guy too, David, that was beloved in Chicago, was beloved in Boston, and he was there, 2 months? People would love Kyle Schwarber here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, he was great in DC as well before he went to
That's
Boston.
right. Yeah,
He was
he was at
phenomenal.
DC as well. He'll be a fan favorite. He'll be a guy that people will have his jersey. That kind of player. Um, but yeah, man. I mean, let's hope they get something going here soon because we're 2 days in. I'm itching, man. I need to see something change with this roster. I think all those guys would be fine choices. I'm also a guy we talked about before we got on. I'm not as high on Castellanos as other people are, but I would be okay with if that's their move, they sign him. I mean, he's a hell of a hitter. I just think he's a guy that's going to be tied to the designated hitter because he's just a horrendous defensive player. Um, and I also think that, and I already mentioned him once, Conforto's a name to watch too. Um, who's going to cost you a lot less money to where you would be able to then again make another move. He can't be your move. He can't be the move, but he's a good offensive player with a down year in 2021. He had a down year though, David, and he still had a on base percentage of 344, and that was a bad year. So he's a guy who gets on base a ton. I think his OPS in Citizens Bank Park's over 900, so he rakes in Philly. I think he's a name to watch. I would not be surprised if they ended up with Conforto in left field.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you can add Conforto and a Bryant or a Schwarber, I'm feeling a lot better
I
about
would think
about
it
the
would
Phillies
have to be
offense.
Brian or Castellanos because you can't just keep loading up on these lefty power bats.
Yeah, that's a good point as well.
Yeah, but we'll
Um,
see. I mean, if it is Conforto, they have to sign one of those other guys because Conforto is going to cost you what 10 to 12 a year, maybe.
yeah, it depends how. But I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to know what these guys' market are because like you
Yeah,
always have a team that's willing to overpay for someone like a Conforto. But it's yeah, probably around that 10 to 12 mark.
yeah, which is fine. Give him. Let's say they sign him for 33 over 3. Then you can pivot and try to sign a Chris Bryant. For 25 a year, 20. Probably 20 a year, I would say, I think is more realistic because he's definitely not valued as highly as he was 5 years ago,
Mhm.
where he would have gotten the Bryce Harper type of contract.
The other name I want to bring up real quick before we sign off that we haven't mentioned is Trevor Story. And the Phillies have been connected to him dating back
Yep.
to last year's trade deadline. And I know for a fact they were connected to him pre-lockout. And it's kind of the same argument as Correa, as you need a shortstop like Didi Gregorius. No. Bryson Stott, we're not sure. Trevor Story is one of the better defensive shortstops and one of the better hitting shortstops in the game of baseball. And I think the interesting thing with Trevor Story is it's very possible he takes a 1 year deal to reboost his value. He's coming off a down year.
Yep.
Colorado was a mess. It really wasn't his fault. He had no protection. But you put him behind Bryce Harper, stacked between Reese Hoskins or JT. Like you'll probably have a pretty good year and then get quite a bit of money. So Kevin, I'm curious, does that interest you at all in terms of a short-term win now move, throwing 1 year, 15 to 20 million at Trevor Story?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And do the Trevor Simeon. Trevor Simeon in the NFL. Marcus Simeon. Do the same type of thing he did, which ended up working in his favor. It's the same type of thing that Carlos Rodon did, ended up working in his favor. Because if you don't remember, just off topic, Rodon was non-tendered last year. And he comes back and signs for $22 million a year. I mean, that's pretty good move on his part. I agree. I could see Story doing something similar. We've talked about Story again on this show. I'm in on Trevor Story. There is the narrative that, and I've mentioned here on the show before, leaving Coors Field. But I also agree that it's probably overblown, because he still is a hell of an offensive player. I've had people reach out to me and kind of just be like, once he's adjusted to not being there anymore, he'll probably be a better player too, which I think that's fair as well.
Well,
But
and like Citizens Bank Park, short left field, brother.
for sure.
Short
Oh my
left
God.
field.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So, I think he could easily come to Philly and hit 30 plus homers, and have a nice year. Reset his value for 1 year. I mean, well, then you get to the point if he's going to reset his value for 1 year and he's very good, you probably look to just sign him at that point, right? So yeah, I'm in on any of these big bats, man. And like I said, like how I mentioned, Castellanos is not someone that I would look to bring in, but at the same time, I am willing to, acknowledge that he's a great offensive player. And like, okay, if that's who they end up signing, I'm not going to be pissed off and, be banging my head off the table, because at the end of the day, David, I want them to win. So, if they're looking to improve their roster and they're bringing in guys that are going to help, I'm going to give these guys the benefit of the doubt. And, that's kind of been my MO anyway. When they moved on from Andrew Knapp, I even said to you on the show, the next guy can be just as bad. I just need somebody new to get upset with, because it just got to the point where it's like, like, why are we still doing this? So, I'm going to give anybody they bring in, I'm going to give an opportunity to have success. I'm not going to be critical right off the jump.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, great point with Andrew Knapp. Like, we just need some new faces, some new blood.
It gets to that point, man, where it's just like, what are we doing?
Man, there was just some serious bad vibes with the old Phillies team, where he just had so many, the Andrew Knapps of the world.
Andrew Knapp coming up the pinch hit here, and you're like, all right, well, this is an out.
The Andrew McCutcheons, like, Roman Quinn, we're gonna get a couple of games out of him. Like, so many of these guys that were never successful.
Love when he got DFA'd and people were like, what the hell are the Phillies doing? I'm like, what?
You watched the last decade?
Can't believe they gave up on this guy. It's like, dude, he can't stay on the field. I think he's played 162 games in his career, David.
Yeah, like, he's
been with the Phillies like 5 or 6 years now,
if not longer. Yeah, so get some new faces in. They got some young talent that I'm excited to watch play this year.
And I'm just happy to watch baseball, David, more than anything.
Yeah, no, preach. You say that again. But yeah, get some guys who've been there, who've done it, who've won baseball games, who've won playoff games, who've been in the big moments. They didn't shy away, and let's help elevate the guys on our team who deserve postseason in 2022.
Yeah, and before we do sign off here, just to briefly mention, we can't rule out the trade market. It's possible they'll swing a trade for, maybe they'll go big and get a Matt Chapman from Oakland. I think a name to watch, though, David, is still Craig Kimbrell. I would not be surprised if the Phillies go and try to make a move for Kimbrell, who is still being shopped by Chicago. So, look, they signed Knebel. I know the idea was, we're going to give him an opportunity to close, but, bullshit, man. If you have an opportunity to get Craig Kimbrell to bring in here and you get another high-powered arm like that, like, how do you think these teams win in October? They load up on these super bullpens. So I think that's a name to watch as well. But yeah, I want them to see them bring in some bullpen pieces too. We are the bullpen blues. So we'll see what happens, but don't rule out the trade market as well.
Yeah. Real quick point on that. Like, I think the trade market, in theory, should be the number one way the Phillies look to improve their baseball team. We know that they have money. We also kind of know who they're planning on spending on to fill out the rest of the holes, whether it's shortstop, third base, center field, the bullpen, the rotation. You're going to have to get creative. And Dave Dombrowski, he knows how to spend his money. Don't get me wrong.
Yep.
But his number one best asset throughout his entire Hall of Fame career has been fleecing teams in trades. So that's where I'm looking for him to do some serious damage, whether it's picking up another bullpen arm, picking up a rotation arm, fixing center field, fixing shortstop, whatever it is. That's where Dombrowski needs to, show some muscle a little bit and work with what he has.
Yeah, I know it's something to watch in the coming days. As we do get set here to sign off here, I'm sure now with baseball back, David and myself will be on the airwaves much more frequently. We ran off a system last year where each time a series concluded, we tried to hop on. We haven't hammered out the details yet, but off the air, we'll look to get something in place. But, thanks for sticking with us throughout this ridiculous ordeal. The support's been unreal as our numbers continue to climb. More and more people, more of you guys continue to tune in, and we love doing this. So just the idea of having baseball back, we can get more content out for you guys. Our YouTube page is going to continue to grow. You guys have been awesome on Twitter with the multiple giveaways that we've had. Everyone's been so engaged, commenting on our content on Facebook. We'll have another giveaway coming up for you here shortly. There will be a few ball games throughout the season that we will also look to give away tickets to. So just want to say thank you for all the support we've been able to obtain. And, let's keep the momentum rolling now that baseball is back. So just keep your eye out. There will be a lot more content coming from us, as we approach opening day and beyond.
Yeah, numbers went up for us over here at Bullpen Blues during the lockout. So we are very, very grateful, very, very appreciative for all the support and all the interaction. With that said, if you're not following us on Twitter, our Facebook page, both of those links can be down in the description. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, YouTube. Definitely go check out the YouTube channel. Again, we have the video versions of every single podcast up on the YouTube channel. We're going to have more giveaways coming around shortly. And hopefully the next time we're on the air, Kevin, we got some flashy free agent signings to talk about.
Well, and like we mentioned, it's going to happen as soon as we hit end here. My phone will buzz. We'll get breaking news or something.
Yeah, extremely stressed about that becoming a reality. But with that said, we are the Bullpen Blues podcast, and we will talk to you all in a couple of days.
Go Phils.